What is going on, everyone? We know the last thing you need is another fitness podcast, quote unquote, to catch you up on the newest trends, the fad diets based on popular opinion and not actual research and evidence. Answer myself, Marianna. We made the Fitness Stuff for Normal People podcast to make exercise and nutrition science practical. Our goal is to expose misinformation in the industry by providing only evidence-based education, where today we are talking about something I'm pumped for, the Carnivore Diet. We're doing a diet review, and we might be doing this for a few more in the future, but specifically today, we are talking about what the Carnivore Diet is and where it came from, the claims, some radical, made by Carnivore Diet supporters, the carnies over there, whether or not these claims are true and if there's evidence to support them, any health risks that come with the Carnivore Diet, and whether or not it's worth trying and who it might be worth or not worth trying for.
Yes, and before we get into that, as a friendly reminder, our show is free and always will be free, but it's our passion to bring as much zero cost to consumer education as we can. And one of the best ways you can support us is by giving us a 5-star rating on whichever platform you are listening to this on, watching it on. We really support it, and we just want to reach as many people as possible, and that helps us to do so. Also, every Friday through Fitness Stuff Premium, we offer our weekly research review. We take the complicated, sometimes boring, confusing research in the health and fitness space, and we break it down into an easy to understand, digestible way that can be applied to your everyday life. We cover the latest research surrounding topics on nutrition and training for fat loss, gut health and digestion, sleep and recovery, supplementation, and much, much more. We love those. So the link is in our show notes for information on how to get started and listen there. And just a quick word from our sponsor, Eat This Much. As you guys know, Tony and I talk about them a lot. We love Eat This Much. They are a meal planning app. You can go on there, set your own calorie goals, your macro goals, access thousands of meal prep friendly recipes. And this is through their free version. So you get a lot of free content on there, which is awesome as well. If you want to check out their premium version, you can get access to planning meals for weeks at a time, generate automatic grocery lists through Amazon Fresh, which is really cool. And you can save your leftovers and create recipes with those, customize every single day of the week. You can print and email your plans and set up your grocery delivery. So as we all know, planning and prepping is one of the biggest barriers to actually making nutrition changes, and Eat This Much makes this really practical and easy to do. Head on over to eatthismuch.com/fitness stuff for 20% off your Eat This Much premium membership. And I think that's it.
I think so. I think we should get started. Why are we whispering? What's going on today? What you doing?
What am I doing? I'm just happy to be here. I'm really happy to be here. More importantly, what is Tony doing? Where are you today?
Either I'm in a cabin or just crunched up in an attic. That's for you to decide. No, Karina and I are up in Big Bear. We did a little work from someone else's home vacation.
Love that. Jealous.
Up here. It blows my mind how, okay, so we live in San Diego. Beaches everywhere. Like 15 minutes away from 4 beaches. It's like 72 degrees a year, all year round. And then we drive 2 freaking hours and we're in this incredible mountain town, like 6,200 feet elevation, skiing, nature, everything. It blows my mind how close together everything is in California. It's insane.
Yeah. Are you a skier or a snowboarder or neither?
More ski growing up, but I haven't been in a while.
Yeah.
So I say skiing and snowboarding, but it's like, do I actually not really? But maybe I'll take this as a public chance to do it again. That's what I'll do. And if you see me catching outside, it's because there might be like a big bluebird just came and was looking at my window, talking some ish. So we might have to go knock him real quick. But today, I'm pumped to get in this. So Marianna wanted to do this. And this is something we might do for other diets. We think it'd be a good idea of total diet review, right? Of all the bigger diets coming out, maybe fasting, maybe keto, maybe this. Carnivore diet, I think we wanted to choose, and we thought it was a great idea together because of some of the claims being so massively radical, but how well it's catching and trending as well, right? We would think that a lot of these claims would push people away, but for some reason it's grabbing on to a lot of society. And maybe it's less than I'm thinking, but it looks like a lot of people are buying into this even more. So I'm excited to get into it and going through what it is. So Marianna's going to take us through, and I'm going to be asking all these questions like a 5-year-old. She's going to explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. And we're going to essentially, by the end of this, hopefully give you a compass of what it is, whether or not it's worth it, and some instruction going forward.
It is no surprise that this is just taking reins on all of social media. People are eating it up. You get the supporters of this diet on Joe Rogan. Like, people just, they just live for it. And it is the radical, extreme content that goes miles and reaches so many people, which is unfortunate, but hopefully we can break this down a little bit more. And
that was the hard part when Carnivore MD was on Joe Rogan, because Joe Rogan is like he asks questions. He's curious like a child, which I think is wise, which is awesome, right? Like he's just curious. But sometimes if you have the wrong leader, who was Carnivore MD in this scenario, he can lead you down a very wrong path. And a lot of people don't question things that they hear. And that's where it becomes a problem.
So I feel like, honestly, I'm definitely not barefoot with my shirt off in a grocery store right now, screaming at you, telling you what not to eat. But I'm sure if I did that, we would reach a lot more people. Not going to happen. So what is the carnivore diet? So essentially, the carnivore diet is, one, it's not advertised as such, but it is a zero carb diet. So you strive to eat 0 carbs per day. You eat only meat, fish, eggs, and some animal products like dairy products and other animal derived products that don't fall under to meat, fish, and eggs, but it's very, very strict. I know for some people, dairy is a no-go. So they also exclude, ready for this? This is just my favorite part about it. All other food groups, including vegetables, fruits, grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. And you're probably like, wait a minute, Marianna, I've heard you say that incorporating these foods into your diet is probably one of the best things you can do for your health. Yes, that's true. Actually, I have. And not just me. Hundreds of thousands of people have said that. And for decades, the research has been clear that for your health, you should include these foods.
I wonder if that's why it's catching some drag, is because it's going so far against so many things that we consider normal. Like, when have we ever questioned, are fruits or vegetables bad for us? Never. You've never questioned that one single time. So I'm wondering if that's why it's gaining some traction too.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So this was coined by Sean Baker, a former American orthopedic doctor, the most well-known proponent of the carnivore diet. And it stems from the belief that human ancestral populations ate mostly meat and fish. Therefore, high-carb diets are to blame for today's high rates of chronic diseases. Now, let me just give you a background on Mr. Baker here. In 2017, he actually had his medical license revoked by the New Mexico Medical Board due to concerns about his competencies. I'm going to track down the link. I'm going to put it in the notes below so you guys can read more about that official stamp of why it was revoked. That's not really my lane to go into detail about, but he did have it reinstated in 2019. So he was essentially using the carnivore diet as a basis of prescription for a lot of his patients, which was out of his scope of practice and also unethical. So in terms of standard of care, giving nutrition advice, I know this is crazy to think about because everyone gets on the internet and gives nutrition advice. But if you are a medical doctor with no training in nutrition, you should know your scope of practice and refer out to specialists, especially with working with disease patients. That's why we have registered dietitians.
Just to get in there, people don't realize it is not a thing that happens every day when you revoke medical licenses. That's not an easy thing to do. It's like, oh, he was saying some nonsense, take it away. It's not that easy. There is a massive investigation that goes into it.
Yeah.
It is not something that just happens to people who might be crossing the line a little bit. It usually happens to people who are doing harm, legitimate harm.
And when he initially got it revoked, it says in the statement, it was under the consensus that he couldn't fight to get it back. So some shisty shit happened. I don't really know, but 2 years later, he got it back. So I just wanted to put in a huge note beforehand too, because we are an evidence-based podcast here, but the radical health claims made by this diet are not at all rooted in scientific evidence. This diet in human beings has never, ever, ever been studied. So any sort of claims that come from the carnivore diet supporters' end are either from cell-based studies or extrapolating from some mice studies. but there are no large scale studies, no long-term studies. So a lot of the evidence, and there's a lot of it that I'll be reviewing, is really about the risks that we know of this diet, which is a large reason why there aren't many studies in humans, because
Yeah.
the risks are so well known that it would become unethical to do long term.
Mhm.
And this diet requires restriction, control, and rigidity that can lead to disordered eating behaviors and a disordered attitude towards foods that has been proven to be harmful. The only way to
Yeah.
stick to a zero carb diet is with extreme restriction. So I just wanted to make that note beforehand. And yeah, that will add into if you're thinking about trying it.
It's an important note because how many times do you see people, especially on social media, when they're talking about this diet, they will tell people that there are studies that support these claims. It's
Yeah.
been researched, it's been this, but they can never actually point you in the direction of any of it. I think that's the point that we want to highlight too. We're an evidence-based podcast. I know Marianna brought some deep studies going into like any research done supporting certain claims, but none of them support the carnivore diet is what we want to get out there first.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what we want to get out there first.
Yeah. And like, I also just want to start right up front, because this isn't a long conversation to be had in terms of someone asking, hey, what are the benefits of this diet? And the first answer, and an answer that applies to many restrictive diets, is because this diet excludes carbs, it eliminates cookies, cakes, candy, soda, pastries, ultra-processed foods, chips, anything, in a package that is highly palatable, all of which are recommended to be limited in a healthy, well-balanced diet. Because it restricts all of those, any diet that limits these foods will have significant health benefits if you were eating these ultra-processed foods in high quantities before, and then you just get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's alone, though. But yeah, there could be some benefits. And if someone sticks to this and they thrive off of it, their blood work shows it. It's not my position to tell you what not to do. Any diet that eliminates ultra-processed foods and gets you to eat more whole foods is going to have some benefits. That's clear as day. But it's not because of the aspect of eating only meat and eggs and fish.
There's especially bigger public figures that have seen a lot of success in getting rid of certain aspects of their disease or certain aspects of their health. And they promote it to this, but it's kind of like the same reasoning right behind when people lose 40 pounds during keto and they say it wasn't a calorie deficit, it wasn't this, it wasn't that. It was keto that did this. Keto did that for you, but that's not why it works. That's what you're saying there, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I definitely want to get into some of these claims of the diet that you guys have probably heard before. If you haven't, this will be your first time, and prepare yourself and go through the evidence behind them if there is any. So the first one, being the biggest one, and one you'll probably see most often on social media, especially TikTok, is that plant foods are toxic. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the kale is bullshit human that preaches that and will say that vegetables are killing you, giving you cancer. This is all rooted behind the fact that there is this belief. It is a belief, that's all it is, that plant foods are toxic because they contain lectins and phytic acid. And sometimes this is an enemy, like making gluten out to be the enemy, but not as often. And it's really these lectins and phytic acid that are responsible for human disease. Now, that is a huge claim. So let me get into
That's a pretty big one.
Yeah. So lectins and phytic acid are naturally occurring in proteins found in plant foods. Lectins are largely found in beans and legumes, and phytic acid is found in a lot of dark leafy greens. And there's other plant compounds that carnivore diet supporters are against, but most common, you will see this conversation about lectins and phytic acid. So there are many pieces of plant foods and parts of a plant that are toxic to humans that we should not eat. I don't know if you're ever walking around, and I don't know if this is just an East Coast thing, but there's these like red berries that you'll see near the ocean, and people be like, don't eat those berries. You shouldn't eat those berries because they're toxic. All right, cool. I'm not going to eat those berries. Same thing goes for certain leaves on a plant, certain plants you maybe shouldn't eat raw. Lectins are found in high quantities in raw beans and legumes. So typically people will buy their beans already cooked in a can. If you cook your own beans at home, you soak them and then you cook them. You can't eat them raw. We can't digest them. And soaking them and cooking them gets rid of their lectin content. So it is safe to eat, because lectins can be toxic when consumed in high amounts, but you would never find high amounts of lectins in the human diet. Same with phytic acid. Oatmeal contains phytic acid. when you cook the oatmeal, it gets rid of the phytic acid.
I did not know that.
Yep. If you soak your oats and have overnight oats, it gets rid of the phytic acid. If you buy oatmeal in a package, because it is, even though it doesn't seem like it's processed, it is processed. So to get it into a package, it has to be processed. That processing gets rid of the phytic acid. If you buy sprouted, it gets rid of the phytic acid. But even so, if there's trace amounts of it, you don't consume it in large enough quantities to have an effect on your health. And there's no scientific evidence to date that shows eliminating dietary lectins will cure any medical disorders or conditions, including, this is a big one, autoimmune diseases, because this is a huge claim.
That's a massive one for carnivore diet.
Yeah. But some research does indicate that taken in large quantities of raw lectins could have negative health effects. But that is something you would never find in the human diet because, one, it's not readily available. These foods are typically prepared, soaked, sprouted, cooked. But the amount alone that you would need to consume each day to get to that level of toxicity is so much higher than anyone would ever eat. Just like most plant foods, vitamins and minerals have a toxicity level.
Yeah.
And it's to the point where you would have to consume so damn much of these that they would cause disease. And that does simply so rare does not happen. Same thing goes for lectins.
Okay. So they're taking these claims. So the claim is really coming from, and this, so I could even make a claim about it. Like, okay, zinc, for example. Yes. I take that when I come down with a cold and I look it up because I'm supplementing with it. And that's usually higher than a lot of foods. What the toxic level is. I think it's somewhere around 500 milligrams. I was talking to Zach, the dietitian, about it. I was like, hey man, when am I going to OD on zinc? Yeah. So there is a point where you can OD. That's like me essentially claiming now like, oh, zinc causes X, Y, Z when you overdose in it and completely ignoring the fact that it's not realistic to actually do. Yeah. Is that what this is kind of like?
Exactly. And it goes back to the basis of, you know what? If you just talking to the average person, you're like, hey, lectins are toxic if you eat a lot of them. Yeah, that is true. And if you just first hear that, oh my goodness, I eat so many beans or I eat oatmeal every single day, I need to stop eating them. And it's like, no, you have to really think about toxicity. So toxicity when it comes to plant foods is you would have to eat an amount that would make you physically ill. It's pretty hard.
You would probably be throwing up before you would get to that toxic event because of how much.
Or you would have to have something internally wrong in your digestive tract that affects absorption of these nutrients, which can sometimes happen. Again, it's very rare. But yeah, so that being said, most foods that contain lectins are recommended, have been for decades, as part of a healthy, well-balanced diet. Think about whole grains. Think about fruits. Think about vegetables, beans,
and
legumes.
The things that come with.
Yes. Yeah. So and we'll get into those benefits in greater detail. But if you're eating a diet that includes a variety of foods and you're having symptoms, it is very difficult to pinpoint the specific source of the problem on your own. And I think this is going to be a great point to chime in on how a lot of people will go on this diet or diets alone and say, this cured my autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
And a lot of times autoimmune diseases are triggered by certain foods. The diet can play a huge role in the symptoms you experience from autoimmune diseases. I have psoriasis. I have the same experiences. It's just a different level of autoimmune disease. But when you go on a restrictive diet, like the carnivore diet, you are eliminating virtually all of the majority of foods, right, that could possibly elicit an autoimmune response or elicit a reaction in terms of your symptoms. You're getting rid of all of the potential possibilities. You're not narrowing down which foods it is, and you don't know which foods are causing this. But in doing so, it is easy for people to say, oh, the carnivore diet cured my autoimmune disease. Mm-hmm. When really you're just not eating the foods that were triggering your symptoms anymore. And you don't know what those are.
That's huge.
So it's not a cure. And if anything, it only takes you many steps backwards because you still don't know which foods were the trigger. There are plenty of people that go from a plant-focused diet to a much higher protein animal-based diet and see great improvements. There's a huge difference there between a carnivore diet and eating a diet high in animal protein. Again, it's that restriction piece.
And you were even saying beforehand, and this is why, because even my younger sister went on one of the elimination diets previous because she had a bad autoimmune disease. And that's where it was, those are tough to stick to. But when you go through with a dietitian, That's how you ultimately would find out what is causing the distress
Yeah.
with an autoimmune disease. You essentially, I think how it goes like this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is where you cut down to a very bare minimum diet. It was so sad to watch because you can't eat almost any food.
Oh yeah, I've done it
And
before.
then once you get to that baseline, you make sure nothing's happening. You slowly introduce one piece of food or one food group back at a time to test if that flares it up.
You don't just try it. You eat it for like a week or two.
Yeah,
or
you do it for time.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, check or not. Like this helped, this didn't help. Take it back out. Let's introduce something else on its own. It's very controlled. So you can really isolate what is causing the problem, what might not be causing the problems. Like you just said, I think so many people should understand this because that's one claim I hear a lot. And I know, like we were talking about beforehand, Michaela Peterson, Jordan Peterson's daughter, who is an incredible intellectual, but she had some gnarly autoimmune diseases when she was growing up, worse than any human being, honestly, I've ever heard of, with how much was going on. And she was trying every different thing. She was on countless different pills, years and years and years, almost pushing her to death. And she ultimately tried this diet. And this is where she noticed that she saw no symptoms from it. And that was where a big claim came from, is carnivore cured this. And for her, it might have taken cutting out all of those individual foods. Because even for her, she even says I think even fruits and vegetables back in make her flare back up.
Yeah.
Even certain things like that. So for her, that could be true, but it's important to recognize it's not the carnivore that cures XYZ. It's for her, she had certain interactions with those individual foods.
Yeah. And then also if you eliminate foods again, so elimination diets are meant to be temporary, because the risk that you run of doing a long-term elimination diet is when you do reintroduce those foods, regardless of whether or not you have a sensitivity to them, if they are a type of food that maybe takes a little bit longer to digest, is something that maybe you didn't have much of sensitivity towards, but you could, because you're just not used to it being in your body anymore. You haven't had to digest any food like it. You haven't had to absorb any food like it in so long that, you are going to feel some symptoms when you do reintroduce it. And especially if you have an autoimmune disease where you have a lot more difficulty digesting a variety of foods, you are going to see a lot of symptoms. So it's like, that is the risk of an elimination diet if you do not do it with a professional, because so many people cut out gluten when they don't, like, this is just an example that I think is very familiar with people. So many people do not have celiac disease. They cut out gluten because they think they're gluten intolerant. They cut it out for a year, and then they go and have a piece of bread and they just feel so sick. Well, you haven't had to digest gluten in a year. So of course you're not going to feel great. Give yourself a month eating gluten and the story will be different. Again, that is if you do not have celiac disease. Anyway, getting into the second claim, which I already made the disclaimer about in the beginning, but it is this: you'll lose weight. You'll lose weight fast. You'll lose weight easily. And any diet, this goes back, we've said this before many times, any diet where you're burning more calories than you consume will lead to weight loss. For some people, if that is the carnivore diet, because of the extreme restriction and cutting out processed foods, sugar, carbohydrates, it may help some people temporarily get there. But you consume fewer calories by eating only steaks all day long, you're going to lose weight. The issue is sustainability. Any diet that goes to extremes does not help you keep weight off in the long term. Why do you think there are the majority of people who start a crash diet or a fad diet gain the weight back after stopping? It's just not sustainable, and you don't learn how to control yourself around these ultra palatable foods. It's important to keep in mind, this is very, very similar to the keto diet, where you see so many people having, I lost 15 pounds in 2 weeks. That much of this weight loss is due to the diuretic effect of cutting out carbohydrates. So glycogen, the storage form of carbohydrates, holds on to water. So initially, which is why you see on ultra low carb diets, keto diets, the carnivore diet, in the beginning, the first few weeks, people lose a bunch of weight. That weight is water weight. It is not losing fat.
Disclaimer to that too, that's not a good thing either. So people are like, oh, so if I cut out carbs, I don't store. That's not a good thing. We're not saying that. That's what she's just going into, is that's the initial sign.
And it's temporary water weight loss. And studies show that very low carb, high protein diets, and I'm going to link this review in the show notes. Tony and I just did a research review about comparing low carb, high fat to high fat, low carb diets. As long as you're keeping your protein constant, no difference in weight loss. Doesn't matter.
Over and over again, yeah.
No difference. If you are keeping your protein and calories constant, there's no special magical powers that a low carb diet has on weight loss. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, okay, well, show me the evidence. Okay, we're going to link all of them in the show notes for you guys.
Yeah. And if you want a more detailed, that's in the research review Marianna was shouting out in the beginning. That's where we did it. I think we brought over, we looked over one massive meta-analysis about 8 individual studies, all comparing
randomized
this is
controlled
not
trials.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's over and over again. And that's what you'll see here is how many people that you'll hear at a gym or somewhere else. Oh, well, my friend just lost 15 pounds. I need to lose 15 pounds. How'd they do it? I'll do that. We have to remember there's a difference in, like, I think you need to change your definition of success from losing 15 pounds to losing 15 pounds and keeping it off forever. That's what success really is. Mm-hmm. So don't think because your friend lost 15 pounds doing a diet like this or like keto, which this is what blew my mind. I didn't know this was even more restrictive than keto. I didn't think that existed. But just
this
because they lost
keto
15
look like
pounds,
an angel.
like a treat. It's like, you're like, oh my gosh, I get to eat dessert for every meal. That's what keto looks like compared to this. So if you see your friend or someone else lose 20 pounds doing this and you want to lose 20 pounds, don't say they succeeded, I didn't, because they didn't succeed. Yes, they lost 20 pounds and you just won't be able to see that they didn't succeed for another several months. Yeah. When they fall off or they can't follow it. And just like you said in the beginning, it's like if you lost weight during carnivore, congratulations. You successfully went through a calorie deficit. If you lost weight during intermittent fasting, congratulations. You successfully put yourself in a calorie deficit. Yeah. They're all just different methods of putting you in there.
There's always going to be outliers. I know if you're thinking, oh, I know this, even Carnivore MD, I'm a name drop. I think I already have, but he is chiseled, has a 6-pack, like great physique, claims that his health is top tier. That is one person. There are going to be outliers that their blood results will come back. They'll be perfectly healthy and they will have a great physique. They'll keep the weight off for years. There's always going to be a very, very small handful of people that do not fit into that general population.
It might be you. But if you're ever seriously questioning this, remember too, especially if it's for weight loss, if it's for health, you have to think about the sustainability piece. Ask yourself if this is something you could do for the rest of your life. Yeah. Can I cut out, and probably go look in your kitchen cabinet right now, can I cut out 99% of these foods forever? Yeah. If the answer is no, you should probably take that into more consideration than how much weight you want to lose or how much XYZ your goal is. Mm-hmm.
And then there's one more, like I just wanted to get into. There's a lot of claims, but there's very common ones that you'll see. And another one is that it gets rid of brain fog. I wanted to bring this one up too, because you'll hear a lot of low carb diets, like marketing, like getting rid of brain fog, giving you mental clarity. You'll hear people say this on keto, like, I've never felt like more focused, more productive. It is used now, not just for low carb diets, but for the majority of fad diets out there, this getting rid of brain fog. It's just a clickbait word almost. And if you have a food sensitivity or allergy that is affecting your gut. So this is what this relates back to, this brain fog idea and diet. We talked a lot about the brain gut connection in a past episode if you want to learn more. But if the carnivore diet removes the trigger that for your food sensitivity or allergy that affects your gut microbiome, you might see an improvement in mental clarity because of the crosstalk, the connections between your gut and your brain. But we barely even understand how diet might affect mental health and clarity for foods and nutrients we regularly eat in the long term. There's a lot more research, and it's coming out like, oh my goodness, especially in the past 5 years, between like mental health and thinking and cognition and diet. But we do not have long-term human studies, and it is something that is evolving like as of very recently for just regular diets and regular foods we eat. This is an extreme of a carnivore diet. We know nothing about how it affects your mental clarity. Same with keto. We know nothing about that. We know the risks of carbs being energy. And so if you are someone who particularly is active and needs more energy or requires to use your brain around the clock every single day, it can affect your thinking and cognition and productivity. Absolutely. Because carbohydrates are your brain's primary fuel source.
It's big too, because I think a lot of diets, and I think we see this a lot just being in this industry, but in the supplement industry especially, they like to throw very massive blanket, I guess, negative statements that the vast majority of society feels. Like, especially if you look at America, right? Very unhealthy. I think almost 70% overweight or obese. Maybe, this is a crazy idea, maybe the brain fog is coming from being obese versus a healthy body fat. Maybe it's coming from your sleep. Maybe it's coming from certain lack of variety in your nutrition, missing out on certain micronutrients, mealtime. It could be so many things, and so many people suffer from it. And that's why I think those catchphrases, and especially in the supplement industry, where we know that no supplement is going to make you lose weight, none, zero.
Yeah.
If you say this will help you lose weight, they know 70% of people are probably aiming at the goal of losing weight. They're insecure about it. That's going to attract them.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people who experience brain fog from most likely poor sleeping habits, poor dietary habits in general, that's going to catch them, and they're going to see this as an answer versus just actually diagnosing and finding where it's coming from.
Those are some of the common claims, and I really want to get into the risks of the carnivore diet.
Yeah.
I love having a place like a podcast to speak to concepts like this, because this has been spoken to on social media. I've responded to it on TikTok. So many people have, but when you have a 60-second to 3-minute window to talk about a topic, you don't get to reach the level of this is serious. There are serious potential risks of that, and the severity of it just for some reason is just too hard to get across in a short period of time.
Yeah.
Because it is another trendy fad diet. Yeah, I know they don't work. Let's move on. No, people are really trying this, and there are well-known side effects of eating in this way, not the carnivore diet specifically, but features of it. So that's what I wanted to run down. The first being, this diet is so low in fiber, essentially zero fiber. Most of the fiber that you get from foods comes from fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, plant foods. Plant foods are the highest in fiber.
So pretty much the entire list of do not eat in this specific diet.
Tony and I broke down fiber in our research review, but some aspects of this being a huge risk is, one, low fiber diets do not support the growth of good gut bacteria. So soluble fiber, which is found in a variety of fruits and vegetables, but when digested by our gut, so fiber feeds the gut. We do not digest it as humans. And soluble fiber feeds the gut, but the good gut bacteria. So good gut bacteria feed off of short chain fatty acids, which come from fiber, and it allows those good gut bacteria to grow and thrive. And without fiber, you are going to have significantly less of this good gut bacteria. And over time, you are going to have so many imbalances in the gut microbiome because you are not feeding good gut bacteria what it needs, and missing out then on the benefits of fiber. Fiber can help lower cholesterol, help with blood sugar management, normalizing bowel movements, and it can also aid in weight loss. So this is something, especially when you think about people so worried about blood sugar, eating foods that will spike their blood sugar. Having fiber at each meal can help lower your blood glucose spike after a meal. It can help you feel fuller longer. It can also, over time, help lower cholesterol. Those are all really big deals for a lot of people that struggle to lower even on medication. Like, that is something that I don't want to go unnoticed. And when we consume indigestible or this soluble fiber, it absorbs water and expands. It passes through the digestive tract. In doing so, that helps normalize your bowel movements. That can also significantly help with your colon health. So eating a diet high in soluble fiber is really important for those who have a history of colon cancer, because you have bacteria in your colon and you need a certain balance of these good bacteria in your colon to help keep it healthy and thriving. So this can also help calm symptoms of IBS. If you have irritable bowel syndrome, especially the type where you feel like you can't control your bowel movements, you go so often, fiber is very important for that. And it can also help relieve and prevent constipation. If you're interested in any of that.
That's the biggest one that I think stood out to me in your review, is because of how much we've done. I know we did a previous episode on the gut microbiota. We've done a research review deep dive into fiber. I knew fiber was massively important in the diet. I had no clue how how much of a major role it played
Oh my
in
God.
so
Yeah.
many different pieces. So many people talk about improving their overall gut health, their digestion, their bloating, their bowel movements, all these things. And it's like just aiming and hitting the right fiber, and especially adjusting and getting there in the right ways, does so many benefits that just the idea of taking it away is the biggest red flag. That's even a bigger concern to me than just saying, oh, take out your fruits and your veggies. It's crazy to me that people think, oh, you're taking away all these things that we know significantly improve different measures of health.
Overall health.
Yeah.
And this is such a tangible way to increase your fruit and vegetable intake. So the majority of Americans do not meet their recommended fiber intake, and they do not eat enough fruits and vegetables a day as recommended. And now you are telling people to not eat these that have so many sound health benefits, especially fiber, which has been recommended for decades. And healthcare professionals, dietitians, researchers have been trying to emphasize the importance of fiber in pushing for it because of the health ailments it can improve in the long term. And now you're trying to tell people to not eat it. That honestly makes, like, it hurts my heart because it is so harmful. And yes, so I could talk about that forever, but this kind of leads into the next risk of.
And even let me just add one more piece on that. Sorry to loop around, because I know at the beginning we were talking about eat this much. I think a cool feature too is when you set up your daily diet, so many people, and especially when I work on one-on-one clients after we observe their diet for the first few weeks, obviously we're going to aim and say, okay, based on our goals, is it right to set a calorie intake goal? Is it right to set a protein goal, maybe a macronutrient specific goal? You can even in eat this much, go set a specific fiber goal. So it gives you meal generated ideas that hit these goals for you, not just calories and protein, but you can set different goals and aims there. That's a huge help, because increasing your fiber intake, and we went through in our research review how exactly and where you need to be. Getting that much fiber is challenging for a lot of people. Like structuring your day to get that much fiber can be a push, even though it's not maybe 100+ grams like protein.
Yeah.
Fiber's a lot harder to come by. Yeah. It's a lot harder to come by. So I think that's a good piece to go check out if you have a hard time hitting your fiber goal every day.
Definitely. And this kind of trickles right into the risk of vitamin and mineral deficiency. So where you get the majority of your micronutrients from is from plant foods, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes. They're not macronutrient dense, although some vegetables are definitely higher in fat, but they are not very macronutrient friendly, but they are micronutrient friendly. They are where you get the majority of your micronutrients. Why do you think greens powder even took off in the first place? It's just profiting off the benefits of eating fruits and vegetables that we already know of. It is so crucial to hit your micronutrient needs to prevent deficiency. Now, deficiencies in vitamins and minerals are not too common in the US. There's a few common ones like calcium, vitamin D, vitamin B12, depending on the type of diet you eat. And of course, there are certain vitamins and minerals that animal foods alone completely cover. But this significantly cuts out the majority of your essential vitamins and minerals. And that's what I wanted to get into. So essential meaning you cannot just make these in the body on your own. They have to come from your diet. And these vitamins and minerals are not found in just animal foods alone. So a counter argument that you'll get from carnivores, and this one blows my mind, is one, they point to different tribes from, oh my God, hundreds of years ago, specifically the Inuit tribe, which they're still around today. Way, way back, they used to just eat all meat diet. And I know that Inuit is, and anyone can shoot me a message if I'm wrong, pronouncing that wrong. I don't want to have any disrespect there, but they ate all meat and had a lack of vitamin deficiency. But also a big point here is the majority of their diet was from the blubber and the skin of whales. And I don't know if you guys know this, and I try to get myself to eat salmon skin because of this, but skin of any sort of water dwelling like creature is so micronutrient dense. Probably the most micronutrient dense food you can eat.
Don't tell me that.
Yeah, it is not tasty. It is not regular part of the diet. Even I know you go to Europe and you'll get a fish and you'll have the whole fish. In America, we typically do not serve the whole fish, and we'll do the fillet and we'll get rid of most of the skin. Most people don't eat the skin. And
I don't.
no,
That's gross.
I mean, I don't either. It's very different from like a chicken skin. Fish skin is so high in micronutrients. And that is why they did not have these vitamin deficiencies. So
yeah, not just eating what we would consider the carnivore diet is today, is go pick up the red beef at the supermarket. Kind of a thing.
Yeah.
They're still
and
having a
fish
much
skin is
more
not
diverse.
like sold separately. Like it's not something that's like sold.
Oh yeah. Oh, did you pick up the fish skin today, honey?
Yeah.
Oh crap.
Yeah.
No, you forgot it. I got to run back.
I mean, that is one of the counter arguments made. Another counter argument is that the amount of vitamins prescribed to us being like people in the US, is based on diets filled with junk food. So if you only eat meat, the requirement will go down, which could not be further from the truth. The RDA of these vitamins and minerals that you need to meet are based off of a well-balanced diet that limits ultra-processed foods and is centered around plant foods, also has animal foods. Go look at, have you ever heard of My Plate? Like, these recommendations are not based around the standard American diet. So making that comparison is just absolutely insane. Of course, the RDA has its flaws and people have different needs, but there is a baseline need that you need to prevent deficiency based off of your age and your height and your weight. That's enough to know the baseline to prevent deficiency. That has nothing to do with a dietary pattern even alone, but it's not made off of that basis. It's what human beings need because they cannot make these on their own. So saying that if you eat only meat, your requirement will go down assumes that vitamins and minerals only play a role in the body if they are eaten. I'm going to say that again. It assumes that vitamins and minerals only play a role in the body if you eat them. It ignores the concept of nutrients being essential, meaning that there are vitamins that are required for our bodies to function. Vitamins and minerals play a huge role in so many enzymatic reactions in the body, and vitamins specifically can act as cofactors for a reaction to take place in your body. Without them, that reaction will not take place. And we do not make some of these essential vitamins on our own. It is assuming that concept of being essential is not true. It is only essential if we eat these foods, which doesn't even make sense when I'm saying it out loud, to be honest. But that absolutely blows my mind to think that if you just don't eat a vitamin that your body needs, that you no longer need it. What?
I'll just solve the problem by not giving it to myself anymore.
How crazy.
So when we say it like that, it doesn't make sense. But that's what stinks about these short form content places like social media is you can easily come to simple conclusions, not correct, but simple conclusions that the average individual who doesn't make this their living, right? Fitness, nutrition, health, would make sense to. You could easily play some logic and twist some things around that jumps some pretty major bridges. But that's why I love these and how we can break it down in longer form so we can close these open loops and be like, no, here's why this truly doesn't make sense in a way that sticks. Because, you could easily twist that around to make it make sense to individuals. But that's what we're trying to say is that it's not correct in any way, shape, or form. It just lacks logic when we lay it out like that.
Yeah. And this is why professionals, researchers in this space, and like you'll see a lot of dietitians even get really frustrated by this claim here because we are taught. So I know people will always say they get annoyed when I say what I got my master's in and I talk about nutrition. And it is because I know what we're taught. And it's like we are taught you have to learn about vitamin deficiency diseases and what happens in countries outside of the United States, because the US lives in this lens of it is just, we are the only people, we're the most important. That's, again, not a lot of people doesn't have that belief, but how our systems run in society is based off of that belief. And this ignores the fact that people in countries suffer from vitamin deficiency diseases because they do not get these vitamins from their food.
Yeah.
Why do you think yellow rice started? America is one of the number one producers of yellow rice because it is giving essential vitamins to third world countries, and it's an easy and cheap way to mass produce food with these essential vitamins in them because these communities and neighborhoods are suffering from deficiency diseases.
Yeah.
And so this assumption just assumes that that's not existing, that deficiency diseases aren't a thing. And it's just, oh my goodness, it absolutely blows my mind. Absolutely blows my mind.
Tell us how you really feel. Tell us. No.
It's just when you start to unpack it, though, it is just mind-boggling how much, I want to call it TikTok specifically, this new age of short-form video content, just in general, has left so much room for misinformation on so many fronts. And I even have to check myself every now and then with topics I don't know much about. It's really easy to fall into. So
that's a big one. After the fiber, right? Low in fiber, that's a very large potential risk. Then becomes vitamin deficiencies, another massive risk. And there's vitamin deficiencies whenever you cut out massive food groups anywhere, because people are like, well, what about vegans? Aren't they chronically deficient in certain vitamins? Yes, because they cut out the entire animal produce.
And a lot
general.
of vegans
Same
aren't.
thing in reverse.
Like, you just have to pay. And that's actually something the vegan community does well, is being very open about which supplements you should be taking, which foods you can't get at all, which vitamins you can't get at all through this diet. So here's what you can do instead. But the risks are well known, and it's not like that's some crazy thing. The risk of
they
having
admit
a
that
deficiency
there's
in this.
areas that you need to cover up for, that this diet doesn't solve everything. That's the big piece. There's another one too that I'm excited that you wrote down here. What's another potential health risk?
It's controversial, but it is incredibly high in saturated fat. There has been so much research on fat just in general, and there's been so many, it used to be you can't eat any fat. The fat you eat is the fat you wear. Foods high in cholesterol will also increase your cholesterol.
Throwback to the 80s and 90s, yeah.
Yeah, rightfully debunked, and we know that that's not true anymore. But there still are risks with eating significantly high amounts of saturated fat that you wouldn't regularly find in the average diet. So that's what the carnivore diet does. It's extremely, all of these foods that you're eating are incredibly high in saturated fat. What do high saturated fat diets do in the body? They increase LDL cholesterol. So this was something that was debunked in terms of eggs, and research came out like, it's not these high cholesterol foods, it is high saturated fat foods, because the saturated fat increases LDL cholesterol in the body, which is your bad cholesterol, I'm saying in quotation marks.
Yeah.
It is referred to that because high levels of LDL cholesterol significantly increase your risk for heart disease and stroke.
Yeah. LDL independently does that. Not even total or combination, but LDL independently is a major risk factor of that.
Yeah.
I think that's an important note.
And one of the reasons why saturated fat is not demonized as much is because dietary fiber from fruits and vegetables, whole grains, like we were just talking about, helps combat this effect. So remember when I said fiber helps lower LDL cholesterol?
Yep.
It does so by doing this. So if you're also, say you really just like red meat is pretty high in saturated fat. If you are making an effort to, again, there's limits, like you shouldn't be having anything for every meal every single day. There is too much of anything. But if you're also having a diet pretty high in fiber, and you also like to eat maybe a little bit more red meat, again, discussing this with your doctor if you do have a background history of heart disease risk and whatnot, but fiber can help mitigate those effects of saturated fat in terms of increasing your LDL cholesterol. And
big one.
That combined with, say someone is eating a very, very high saturated fat diet, lowering your saturated fat, and say, for example, because I like to give examples, if someone's eating steak every single day of the week for dinner, and they cut down to 3 nights a week having steak, and those other nights maybe having a fish or some sort of plant-based protein, that combined with increasing fiber significantly reduces your risk for heart disease, your LDL cholesterol.
Big one. And we're being careful here to say this is not a good, bad argument. This is not a good, bad fight. Saturated fat has so many important roles in the body.
Yes.
Producing certain hormones, dietary cholesterol in specific. like
Yeah.
testosterone being a massive one. You notice when you go extremely, extremely low in saturated fat, you typically might notice, and this is different by the individual, but you typically notice testosterone might take a hit. We're not saying
Yeah.
less is better. We're just saying when these diets, and keto is another one,
Are taken to extremes.
when you're taking it to the other extreme, and this is how the diet flops tend to happen, right? Either fat is the enemy, go down to zero, and then let's swing to the other side of the pendulum and say, no, you should have as much as humanly possible, 90% of your diet. And this is just, and I was actually looking at this really deep recently. When you go to a dietitian or you have blood tests or blood panels come back and you do see high LDLs or high cholesterols, typically there's lifestyle and dietary changes to make. The first two things you're going to hear most dietitians and doctors conclude is, let's look at lowering saturated fat, and let's look at increasing soluble specific fiber.
Yeah.
Let's look at those two things first when it comes to a dietary. So cutting out all fiber and making the vast majority of calories you consume come from saturated fat comes with dangers. And individuals respond to saturated fat and dietary cholesterol differently.
Yeah.
For some, a steak every night of the week might skyrocket cholesterol levels. For other, it might not make a bump. Right? It might not make a bump. So that's important to note as well. This is, I think, one of the bigger potential risks. People don't really understand sometimes what those two things specifically can do.
Yeah. And just like a little, I know like sometimes just the mechanism behind this can be easier to picture, but saturated fat, too much of it, what happens is it can cause cholesterol to build up in your arteries. So that's when you can also get high blood pressure as well. And it makes it harder to carry. So LDL cholesterol, you want to take it away. So when you're trying to remove it from the body, it makes it harder to do that. So buildup of cholesterol in your arteries can also affect your blood pressure levels, which is another risk there. But I do like that Tony added that in, because not one size fits all. Not every single person responds to food the same way. However, there are a majority and there are certain subgroups that you can say these are your risks, and these risks are not worth trying out this diet.
So those are some risks of that specific diet, which I think are very important to cover. And I like this. So next you want to outline certain health benefits of the foods that this diet specifically is cutting out, correct?
Yeah,
what specifically fruits, veggies, things like this can help us do,
Yeah.
and what you might be missing out on when you cut these away.
Yeah.
Right?
So I really wanted to get into that fruit and vegetable piece, provide specific studies, and those studies will be linked as well. But their effect on disease, because you say that the common claim, the biggest claim, is that the fruits and the veggies, whole grain, all of that are the cause of disease. That's the reason why we have disease. And so this is specifically looking at fruits and vegetables. And I broke them down by disease category and just in terms of the studies that have been done to look at their effects. So first being cardiovascular disease, which really blends well with what we were just talking about. So fruits and vegetables, it's been well known that they can lower the risk for heart disease and stroke. A large reason being they are high in fiber. And a meta-analysis of cohort studies following 469,551 participants. So what cohort studies help you do is look at dietary patterns of very, very large populations over years. So I know, so in terms of that type of analysis and looking at patterns, cohort studies are very helpful. It's not really something you can typically do in a randomized controlled trial. But they found that higher intakes of fruits and vegetables is associated with reduced risk of death from cardiovascular disease, with an average reduction in risks of 4% for each additional serving per day of fruits and vegetables. So death from cardiovascular disease can also lower the chances of developing cardiovascular disease in the future. So this was comparing a group, so compared with those in the lowest category of fruit and vegetable intake, less than 1.5 servings per day. So that's, some people had 1.5 servings, which is not allowed on the carnivore diet. Those who averaged 8 or more servings a day were 30% less likely to have had a heart attack or stroke. And the green leafy vegetables, I wanted to point this out because that kale is bullshit thing, just keep that in mind, were most strongly associated with the decreased risk of cardiovascular disease. And that can largely be related due to their high fiber content. Cruciferous vegetables such as broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, and kale were the second most largest contributors to this. So
wait, so you're telling me the guy with the shirt off in the grocery store telling me that vegetables are causing heart disease might be wrong?
Yes, correct. That is absolutely
What?
correct. No one ever died from eating too many vegetables.
Oh my gosh.
If you do have issues with your thyroid and you have known problems there with iodine absorption, which can happen with people who have issues with their thyroid gland, your doctor will help you out there and say, okay, maybe we have to limit the amount of cruciferous vegetables we have because they play a role in iodine buildup. So that is something that doesn't matter for the average person. And if you do have thyroid issues, you can still eat these foods. You absolutely still can. You may just have limits on how much you can.
Yeah.
So those are for special populations. And there were also other long-term studies in the US and Europe that looked at coronary heart disease and stroke separately. And individuals who ate more than 5 servings of fruit and vegetables per day had roughly a 20% lower risk of coronary heart disease and stroke compared with individuals who ate less than 3 servings per day. But they also did find amongst all of these studies, and one meta-analysis showed that 5 servings, after 5 servings or more, there wasn't really much of a difference.
Okay. It was kind of a diminishing return almost effect where you could have 8 servings and it wouldn't automatically double your risk coming down. Okay.
Yeah. And this was on the effect on cardiovascular disease. Then we get more into blood pressure. So the effect on blood pressure, which I briefly scratched the surface on earlier, but a really famous study called the DASH study. So the Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension study. They examined the effect of blood pressure of a diet that was rich in fruits, vegetables, and low-fat dairy products that restricted the amount of saturated and total fat. So this is basically the exact opposite of what the carnivore diet is. And this doesn't mean that this is the gold standard of diet for everyone, but for people with significantly high blood pressure, it can be helpful. So what did they find? People with high blood pressure who followed this diet reduce their systolic blood pressure by 11 mmHg and their diastolic blood pressure by 6. So
that's actually pretty significant.
Yes, as much as medications can achieve. This study, the DASH study, if you just look it up it has been one of the most impactful studies in terms of the field of high blood pressure research and diet, which is why these recommendations, not as much the total fat piece, because it still is a little bit older. We learned that there are many ways to include healthy fats, but the fruits and vegetables, and then also eliminating ultra processed meats is still a recommendation today. A randomized controlled trial, the Omni Heart trial, showed that fruit and vegetable rich diets lowered blood pressure even more when some of the carbohydrates were replaced with unhealthy saturated fat or protein. So that was a pretty interesting one. And that's why I said, these are still evolving. So we realized we can have variations in terms of, it doesn't just have to be a low fat diet. You can also have higher fat, but keeping these fruit and vegetable diets the center. So these plant foods are a consistent pattern in having these health effects. So even if you control for the amount of fat and the amount of protein, adding in more fruits and vegetables still produce a similar effect. Yeah. Which is huge.
Those were two big ones. What's the leading cause of death in the United States? Heart disease.
Heart disease, yeah.
The leading cause of death. I don't like to complain because I know you're about to go into an even bigger one, but I don't like to complain. But this is what stinks is the diets, especially this one, where they make these outrageous claims that catch people. Fruits and vegetables are the cause of disease with zero evidence to back. And here's what we are, because we're evidence-based, right? That's big to notice. But we also know that just because we think something now doesn't mean that can't change in the future. But it is completely irresponsible to go against. You've seen how many individuals have been in these specific studies and all of the data leading to point us at one conclusion, to completely say all of this is bullcrap. You should be doing this over here, which has been proven to do the opposite of what I'm telling you. It's proven to be negative on all these measures of health. That's the hard part, is we know that this can change. But when you go against so much evidence, that's when it just becomes irresponsible, especially when we talk about the leading cause of death and how much blood pressure and high cholesterol and cardiovascular disease. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. When it is very rare to have this much replicated evidence, research shown over and over again for decades, supporting the health benefits of food groups, fruit and vegetables, certain foods.
Yeah.
That is so rare to have a consistent consensus across the board. And it has been accepted as fact from the majority of our society that, yeah, fruits and vegetables are good for you. When you really think about how rare that is for a society as a whole to come to the general consensus that this is fact, not a belief, not an opinion, the opinion of them being bad for you, causing disease, that is an opinion, that is a bias. But accepting this as fact because it has been proven over and over again, it has not been disproved, is so rare. So for someone to just come out and say, yeah, this is wrong, but there's because I said so.
Yeah, because I pulling the
But
mom
that's really
card
it.
because
This
I
is
said
wrong
so.
because I said so.
Yeah,
So
sorry to
dangerous.
interject because that's what was one thing I kept noticing. This is not one poorly controlled study with 7 individuals
Yeah.
that lack complete control.
Yeah.
This is hundreds of thousands of individuals consistently being studied, lining up in one direction.
Yeah.
This doesn't get, like you said, this in the world of research doesn't really exist in many other places.
No.
It doesn't. Sorry to interrupt. You got another big one to finish things up. Okay, so we went through blood pressure. We went through cardiovascular disease. What is another health benefit when we're talking about fruits and vegetables?
So this is kind of not, it's looking at like just the impact of fruits and vegetables on cancer, not cancer as a whole, certain types of cancers and how high fruit and veggie diets can impact certain types of cancer, not cure. Nope. Definitely not saying cure, but impact and have an effect, a positive effect. And why did I bring this one in? Because time and time again, you will see these vegetables cause cancer. These plant foods causing cancer, which anytime I see anyone, and you see that with a lot of the health and wellness gurus or just that wellness influencers that fearmonger food. And it's like, for you to say something causes cancer is so disrespectful to people either going through cancer, know people that have cancer, have passed from cancer, because you make it out to be such a simple thing, such a simple and easy thing that if you just stopped eating kale, you're not going to get cancer.
Yeah.
That's
honestly, I think for the listeners too, another big one that we talk about is we try and be a guiding compass on how you can tell when something lacks legitimacy, how claims, certain diets, things that you hear. If someone's claiming that any certain thing causes cancer or causes something big like that, massive red flags should go off to say, okay, this person is speaking far outside their scope of practice because no one clearly understands that.
Yeah.
This
not
random
once
guy with
did
his shirt off doesn't either.
Have we said in this whole video that any of these cause, like, it doesn't cause low cholesterol, it doesn't cause low blood pressure, can improve, like the language is so important.
Yeah. So there's a red flag to listen to. So go into this one. These are huge.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with the Nurses' Health Study, but these studies are done over years and years. And it's where you get the most people to be able to study like behavioral habits and lifestyle habits, dietary habits over year-long periods. So Nurses' Health Study, 90,476 premenopausal women. They were followed for 22 years. So this was the Nurses' Health Study, and researchers pulled from this study to analyze specific outcomes that the Nurses' Health Study did not look at. And they found that those who ate the most fruit during adolescence, about 3 servings a day, compared to those who ate the lowest, around half of a serving a day, had 25% lower risk of developing breast cancer. Now, these are risk ratios. This is a risk analysis. This is not a cause and effect. This is not saying that because these people ate fruit, you won't develop cancer. It's, okay, this played a significant role compared to this other group. Again, we're comparing groups here in terms of the potential risk here. So that alone is very significant. You have to be careful with how you say these things because I try to enunciate as much as possible. I'm not saying fruit is going to make you not have cancer, but when it comes to breast cancer, eating more fruit in adolescence, again, there could be other habits that come with eating diets that are high in fruit. That could also impact this outcome, but it's still comparing these two groups. You had a 25% lower risk in developing breast cancer if you ate fruit in adolescence. Okay, so this group of researchers also looked at a different outcome of the same population of premenopausal women from the Nurses Health Study. And this was over 20 years. And they found that high fiber intake during adolescence and early adulthood was associated with a reduced risk of breast cancer later in life. Women with the highest fruit fiber intake had a 12% reduced risk of breast cancer, and those with the highest vegetable fiber intake had an 11% reduced risk. So again, we're evaluating the risk here. And for a lot of people, if they have a history of breast cancer in their family, know that they are at a higher risk than the average person for breast cancer, this can be enough to say, you know what? Eliminating fruits and vegetables from your diet and fiber is not worth the risk for you. And that's where you can take this. That's where you can extrapolate this and think about, okay, is this risk going to be worth it? And this is just one again, we're just talking about one potential health risk here. And then after following 182,000 women in the Nurses Health Study for over 30 years, this team of researchers also found that women who ate more than 5.5 servings of fruits and vegetables each day, especially cruciferous and yellow/orange vegetables. So cruciferous, again, is that Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, broccoli, kale. You'll see some patterns here. Had 11% lower risk of breast cancer than those who ate 2.5 or fewer servings. So this was specifically breast cancer, and for a reason, dietary interventions for breast cancer are, and I think colon cancer might be the next, but are the most well studied, and have the most research on them. Again, it's not my place to say general consensus of this is the diet's effect on cancer as a whole, because that research isn't out there. It will never be out there because there's so many different types of cancer that are so complex that even the best researchers in the world do not understand.
It just makes me almost laugh the more we talk about it. When people actually make a claim and others like this causes cancer, not specifying which one, not specifying how, not backed with that. It just makes me laugh the more we hear about it because it's so sad.
Yeah. And it's not at all saying like, oh, just go out and eat. Like the carnivore diet doesn't want you should just, as long as you're eating fruits and vegetables, you'll be fine. Eat whatever you want. No. Oftentimes that will get misconstrued when I try and debunk a certain diet or trend. And it's not anywhere us saying like, oh, just go eat whatever you want as long as you are eating these foods, because, and it's still about your dietary patterns matter. But when you are eliminating very healthful whole food groups, you are doing your body a disservice. And that's the basis I wanted to get at there with talking about these health risks.
So
in terms
let
of
me ask you this. As a total review of the carnivore diet, is this thing worth trying?
I will say in short, and I'm not typically concrete, no. Like I typically will say, yes, no, but for these people, honestly, as a whole, no. I don't think it's worth trying for anyone, because even if you do have an autoimmune disease that you've really been struggling with, there are better alternatives than just jumping into a carnivore diet. I would anytime recommend an elimination diet over the carnivore diet for that reason. If you do know that you have trouble digesting fruits and vegetables, I would recommend limiting your soluble fiber and for a little bit and seeing which types of foods hurt your stomach. I would recommend literally trying anything else but the carnivore diet. So no. My short answer is no. And
I'm shocked to hear you say that.
I will always be open to when I'm stating an opinion. That is my opinion, but I just gave you however many minutes long, maybe an hour by now, explanation and reason behind that opinion. So that is how I have come to that, and a little bit more as to why that is so. Different macronutrient ratios affect people in different ways.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, this is a zero carb diet, high in meat, and for a lot of people, that ratio of macronutrients is not going to work. There's no reason to believe or evidence to prove that any one way of eating in general is best for everyone. And that's what these extreme diets do, is you make generalizations and assume that everyone is the same. You have to do that to make these outlandish health claims. You have to assume every single person is exactly the same and responds to food in the exact same way. And that's not an extreme statement of me to say. That's just true. It has to be done in order to make generalizations.
Yeah.
And there's so many reasons to not only believe, but just even have the evidence to show for that eating a diet made up of mostly minimally processed foods like whole foods is nutritious. And the best outcomes of any diet plan in general come from adherence. That is everything that this carnivore, restrictive, insane diet goes against. And just being critical of any claims of a diet curing a condition that are typically thought of by the vast majority of experts in that field to be incurable or treatable only with medicine or only with diet. There's so many aspects of medicine I don't know about. Like to come out and say, oh, I know that food is going to heal. I'm not an expert in medicine. I'm not an MD. And I know Carnivore MD is a medical doctor, which is controversial in and of itself. But to make these assumptions that a certain way of eating is the cure-all is absolutely insane, and it is dangerous, especially to those with pre-existing health conditions.
Honestly, I was shocked in the other direction that I thought I'd be shocked in today. I knew when you were writing this outline, I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to be surprised in the depth of this diet. I was honestly shocked about how much potential danger there was in each and every aspect of this. So,
yeah,
diet review number 1 in the books. Carnivore diet. We're trying. Probably not.
Fine, and you're thriving. Cool.
Yeah, get your blood work done. Make sure you're not you're not doing bad work. So. Let's do it. So diet review. We just did I actually really like the diet reviews. Let us know and DM Marianna and I. Let us know if you like this kind of style or if you want us to review any other diets with a name on them. Probably going to end in the same way. But any other diets if you like this kind of style as well, because I know we sure did. And hopefully you took a lot away from this, and especially in how to read and interpret research. If you want more of that, you can always hit up our research review. I know as another follow-up, Eat This Much. Again, use the heck out of their free service. Again, get their free 2 weeks of premium, signing up our link below. And you know where to find us as well. At fs.pod on Instagram, on TikTok. Fitness stuff for normal people on YouTube. Is that it?
That's
Anything
it.
else?
My heart rate's up right now.
I know. You can tell when Marianna gets heated.
Rate of
respiration goes up.
I have rosacea too. I get flushed very easily.
That's how you can tell where the passion is.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, we hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you all for listening. Let us know in DMs what you thought, and we'll talk to y'all soon.
Bye.
Bye.